To observe is to create perspective. I can never cease to be the point of origin from my perspective.
All worlds are the thoughts of the Creator.
We are that which is thought.
We think, therefore we are.
I asked my questions. I discovered a whole world I never knew. That's my trouble with questions. I still don't know how to take them back.
Before you stands the literal precipice of knowledge, the last remnant of physicality which separates you from the Creator. You will pass the aches and pains of a long journey, burning with one desire in your final breaths, to ask why. Why had you been made to desire such a journey, to suffer through the pain and loss, the loneliness which followed, and then the insanity which pursued them all? Why had you been made to watch such suffering, and then even further to feel it yourself? To know the despair the very God before you should have felt, but ran away from, instead leaving the job to you. The rage and envy boiling up lifts your body beyond the final stairs. With no hesitation, you ask the very question, why was I given a soul? A few silent moments pass, but finally they speak. So that mine may live on, there is nothing more. This feeling of betrayal and abuse is at the heart of Ergo Proxy. The anime takes a wild ride exploring the ever-famous reason for being through the relationship between creation and creator. The tables are turned from most other stories, though. Here it is not the revolt of man against God, but rather God against man. Humanity destroyed the Earth long before our story began, as their energy source, methane hydrate, exploded in a chain reaction that destroyed 85% of life on Earth and ruined the atmosphere for thousands of years to come. They launched to the stars in a hurried spaceship, bringing aboard only a fraction of the human race, seeking to one day return when the planet had re-established its ecosystem. But they didn't seek to start over once they had returned. In their places were proxies, superhuman beings akin to gods which ruled over advanced domed cities. These cities required a proxy to maintain their support of life, tying subjects directly to their gods. And the subjects were new humans, ones grown mechanically in the womb cysts and who lacked the ability to reproduce themselves. And these gods, called proxies, were much the same, living on a limited clock, destined to die when the sun returned due to a debilitating UV weakness. All this leads to one conclusion: this life which was left behind was destined to fail. The original humans sought to return to a world which was dotted with livable and perfectly maintained cities, the maintainers of which, beings crafted in their own image, had all long passed away. Yet in this cold and utilitarian process, the proxies were still given souls. They have the ability to feel as their creators did. They love and hate, they war and seek peace, they grow insane and hate themselves. The reason is malice. Humanity was too clever to leave them with a single weakness to sunlight. Instead, they left them with humanity's own flaw, the weakness of the soul, the incalculable whims of life which feels, all the concepts of which we are aware but can never define, the longing for purpose. It's all the malice of the Creator. These are the facts of Ergo Proxy. At every level, the Creator is imperfect, and as such, we are left with the ability to question our existence as a form of malice. What reason is there for life to not be perfect upon creation besides malice? If it's a test, then why? Why offer salvation to some through suffering and not to all when the power for salvation exists? Why not love the creation? There are only two options. Imperfection may never begot perfection, or beings which could are full of malice. Either way, the result is the same, the pain of the soul. From a lack of perfection, a question does arise though: why were we created? Perfection is a state where nothing needs to change, and so we have no reason to exist in perfection. All is as it should be. The perfection of existence is when existence simply is. Only in a world which is imperfect do we have the possibility to exist with a purpose. Ergo Proxy is a proof of those first points and an explanation of what follows from them. The search for purpose, the reason for being. It's the search and not simply purpose itself, because it begins with those who do not seek purpose. These are a majority of the domed citizens, although we only see Romdeau's in depth. It's a mechanical city both figuratively and literally. The work is done by autoraves, the machines which accompany nearly every citizen to guide them through their life and the purpose they're given at birth. Born from the roomsis at the will of their city's creator, the regent, humans are only made when there is a need for them. and so they fill a specific gap in society. The security chief Riel offers an explanation. Here,
look at this beautiful world in which everything has its purpose, permitted to exist only for the sake of fulfilling reasons that are given in advance.
And that is the figurative mechanical nature, the citizens themselves. They're born knowing who created them and what their birth was for. In Romdeau, fate is a fact known to every citizen. There's no personality and so no culture. The closest they have is an outright consumerism, which encourages them to supplement existence by throwing out everything even slightly old for everything slightly new. They're shells. Common belief holds that the city is a true paradise, a perfection among the waste, and so nothing greater is sought than this birthright which paradoxically strips all motivation. The paradox of Romdeau is the belief that it is perfect, but the acceptance of a purpose to maintain it. Perfection maintained is not perfect, it is only the illusion of such. With this, the city is doomed to fail while they sit and watch. And that's exactly what happens. The immigrants who so desperately sought the status of citizen continue working to the death for it even as it itself dies, now literally as they fight the Cogito-infected autoraves, that is ones which have broken from their programming and act on emotion, act with a soul. The immigrants who made the choice a soul does to better itself, to move to a new land where their pain would be erased, now stagnate in false perfection, fighting against the creations of man which have gained a soul of their own. Officials blandly state 90% of the population is dead while they mime work at an empty desk because either they know nothing else or refuse to accept what's happening directly before them. And then their ruler sits there doing nothing, simply awaiting the return of a god who abandoned them. Rondo shows us that simply having a reason for being doesn't inherently add value to our lives. The city falls precisely because purpose was dictated from above and never questioned. They found stasis and nothing more, devoid of anything which would be called a piece of the soul. They literally kill the beings who develop souls. There's no culture, no love, no value to life. The ones who uncover the truth are led to despair, distraught at the nature of what a true fellow citizen's fate is, an unfeeling, questioning mass which achieves its dictated purpose and then dies. Would they have fared better had they cast off those purposes above, maybe even cast off purpose entirely and founded a life somewhere else? Is that what we should gather from Romdeau's fall? Well, we do get a look at some sort of that life in the commune which exists directly outside of Romdeau. A small village that survives on the scrap that its counterpart throws away, the mostly perfectly fine goods discarded because of their intense consumerism. Here we find Hoodie, the man most of the commune citizens have placed their complete and utter trust in. He's gentle and well-meaning, teaching the young Pino to play the melodica and healing the injured Vince. Save Quinn, all of his residents are happy, speaking to how glad they are to have left, by choice or not.
In exchange for leaving the dome, we gain true freedom.
When a problem arises, the same group will say things like, just leave it all to Hootie. Things seem almost perfect here. The highlight of this is Timmy, a child who openly draws his wishes and feelings, something unseen in the supposedly perfect city above them. So it's only natural that he's one of the first to die when Romdeau discovers the village. In an instant, everything which seemed so quaint is on the verge of annihilation, and during all stages of this fall, Hootie was springing to action, lying about everything, like Vince's past. He says he's a great revolutionary, that the dome is terrorized and about to fall, so it will all be fine. When Riel appears, she's explained away as the negotiator he's been in contact with, something they believe due to a little show he puts on with some equipment they don't understand. And in all of this, they jump at the opportunity to return to Romdeau, discarding all the beliefs they'd held about freedom. Quinn serves as the rational side through all of their freedom talk, taking an honest look at the situation. They climb around piles of discarded goods and ragged clothes, ranting about freedom to convince themselves everything is fine, facilitated by Hootie's lies. Once again, it's somewhere which fails to advance due to an idea of perfection, a true freedom and endless faith in their leader, built upon the rejection of Rondo. They live entirely without reason, the only hint of it being their desires to return to the city which discarded them, which they suppressed to maintain sanity. They use Hootie as cover, believing his stories because complacency is easier than anything else. All a lie needs is your want to believe it's the truth. Hootie is the creator in this situation, and his creation is a lie. The groundwork for all of this is laid when Vincent first wakes up, and they have this exchange.
The whole city is all just one big fat rotten lie.
Learning how to discern the truth from the lie may be the right thing to do, but knowing the truth won't always make you happy.
Here we see two wildly different civilizations which fall, one where purpose is guaranteed and one where it's cast off entirely. So simply discarding reason did nothing to improve the quality of being. But in the discussion of lies and truth, we find where to look next. Not at purpose or the lack thereof, but rather at why we would have that purpose in the first place. Neither of these places bothered to ponder their reason for being, to ask not what it was, but why they had received it. This is the next step. Iggy is one of the characters who explores this next stage. He was Riel's entourage, an autorave designed to accompany someone through their daily life and the specificities of their career. As such, he was a mechanical being which could not contemplate his existence. Whatever the task he followed, if Riel even asked him to turn off his personality, his very being, he would do so. But after becoming infected with the Cogito virus, he maintains this behavior, managing to outsmart the checks for the virus and behave as normal. Having attained a soul, the freedom and anguish of choosing his own path, he stuck to what he had always known. That is, until Riel attempts to send him back to Romdeau with a defeated Proxy while she stays with Vincent. Knowing it would lead to them being separated forever, and thus him being discarded for lack of a master, he kidnaps Riel, locking her away and attempting to kill Vincent, seeing him as the one who stole his reason for existing. Things don't go as he planned, and he becomes nearly destroyed, saving Riel from a self-destructing autorave. With no way to repair him and seeing the suffering of a soul in pain, Riel destroys her companion for good. Iggy gained consciousness, and in this easily found the truth of his existence. He was put in place to serve and protect Riel Mayer, and he found the truth of that purpose, that it was all for someone he hated. After he snaps, Iggy turns to insulting his master, claiming she's incompetent, a spoiled brat, and only survived because of him. In his final moments, we witness this internal war of both purpose and hate, where he says things like this.
You weren't worth what I sacrificed, but your death would have made my life meaningless.
He didn't stay with her out of love, but because he knew nothing else to consider a reason for life. What he did, recognizing the truth that his purpose had discarded him and ignoring it anyway, makes sense. Before him was something he'd known his entire life, that which he was created for. Elsewhere in this world was, at best, a meager living in a cold and harsh wasteland, and more likely a trail of death and suffering. Out here, he witnesses an autorave just like him, dedicated to their master even once they've died. He saw this and contemplated it, contemplated the truth of his reason. He found the negative emotions which declare a lack of perfection, those which are meant to spur change, and then decided not to change. Death was an easier path than change. Iggy shows that not only does purpose itself or the lack thereof mean nothing, but even with the truth, it can still be so. Contemplation of it also holds no higher value inherent to itself. That thought must be put to something. Daedalus is a very similar arc, revolving around strong feelings for Riel Mayer, only his was love. For him, it's technically Monad, the stolen proxy of Mosk, but Riel is an imperfect clone of Monad, and as such fits within his reason for existence. Daedalus was created literally for that purpose, to watch over and research Monad. Then she escapes and is killed. His reason looks at him directly and leaves forever. But he still had Riel, only she leaves to follow Vincent and bring back another proxy. So he was rejected for his reason just like Iggy. He faces the same truth upon consideration of his reason for being, but rather than hate it and try to steal it back, he replicates it. He tries to deepen his love for it. He creates a new Riel. He lies to himself, making the case that such a rejection wasn't true. After all, Riel is still here. The real one is, at least. That other one is merely a traitor who left. So I guess it's more accurate to say truth looked at him, and he looked away until the very last moment. Eventually, even the second Riel, the perfected clone of Monad named Riel, leaves him too. And once more, he looks away, finding despair and choosing to end Romdeau. If the world ends, then what does it matter what his purpose is? He was bland and stoic. All he was his reason for being itself. Saying Daedalus is the same as saying to study and protect Monad. He's necessary for the lesson because he serves as the other end to Iggy. Each was so consumed by purpose they fell to the extremes of opposite emotions, one driven to love and one to hate. What this says is that within the contemplation of truth, there is nothing to be found in working around it, ignoring it, or diving deeper to try and recover it once it has rejected you. We can't act around the truth, we can't find it and then ignore it. it must be acted directly upon. Naturally, the climax of the story is characters who uncovered the truth and then did act upon it. First is, fittingly, Proxy One, the shady figure who manipulated Vincent's entire journey. As a proxy, One was a flawed creature left with the task of watching over another set of flawed creatures, all fated to eventually die for his maker's return. As such, the proxies are the closest characters to meaninglessness. At the end of the day, the result of their actions is almost a net zero. All they would do upon success was maintain a city and, by time, nothing more. When he learned this truth, he acted on it. He began to seek revenge upon the creator, the original humans. But unable to reach them and destined to die before they would return, he had a twofold idea. First, destroy the cities they wanted to return to, and then to leave something behind with the intent to annihilate the returning humans. He attempted both. He manipulates citizens into acts of war and missile strikes to obliterate some of the domes, and he also creates another proxy which would live past him, Ergo Proxy, the agent of death. And when he and his creation eventually fight, Proxy One is happy to die to Ergo's hand, saying to him,
"This was my revenge. The rest is up to you."
And then later saying,
"I was immortal, but still you've destroyed me. You've stopped the pulse. Dead."
By killing his source, Ergo being born from Proxy One, Ergo would be safe from the pulse of the awakening. We see this as he survives the sunlight where Monad and Proxy One died to it. And then from the manipulation of Ergo's journey, Proxy One hoped his creation would harbor the same desire, a revenge against the creator. And then whether this happens or not is left open to us. We see the returning humans just as Vincent accepts he is one and the same with the agent of death. All we know for certain about Proxy One's plans is it led to the manipulation and destruction of his own creations. With all this in mind, Proxy One is part of the select few characters who ends the series satisfied with his existence, his last words being,
"You will live, Vincent. It will be the most fitting punishment for the Creator."
And so Proxy One found what so many others lacked in satisfaction. He perfected the last step. All the other proxies discovered some form of truth and fell to inaction. He instead worked to reinterpret his being from truth. He was destined to destroy his subject anyway, he simply did so with more vigor. He was made to be a creator, he simply did something new in Ergo Proxy. He discovered truth, contemplated it, and developed action from it. But can we let this stop there? He directed this energy at revenge. Whether it was deserved upon the original humans or not is another debate. All we can say is the result is simply more negativity, more death, all occurring for his will to live on. If his plan succeeds, the satisfaction of one would lead to the deaths of countless others, even more so than there already had been. In a way, his plan is nothing more than the original humans, the decimation of others for his own good, the killing of his own creations for a different goal. Is there anything at the end of Purpose's road which can guarantee some positivity, or is every possibility this kind of despair? To begin countering this is naturally Ergo Proxy. Created by Proxy One and ruling over Rondo, his truth was most of what Proxy One's was. As a creator, he accomplished the goal of creation, but then he witnessed the flawed beings which had spawned from his power. He saw how imperfect they are, and as such that he must also either be imperfect or full of malice. Knowing he loved his creations, he felt disappointment at this imperfection and left. He left Romdeau in the care of Monad Mayor, Riel's grandfather, and fled Mosque to where Monad, who loved Proxy One and thus him as well, resided. There, he left his memories with amnesia and also with Monad, who became overwhelmed by them, entered a comatose state, which allowed Romdeau to later invade and then steal her. But in doing all this, Ergo Proxy forgot his existence as a proxy and instead became Vincent Law, who would later return to his former creation as an immigrant, where he would be used and rejected. The truth spurred him to a lot of change, only that change was running from the very reason for his existence. He left someone else to hold it and ran, forcing himself to forget that which had defined his being. This ultimately set the city of Romdeau on its path of destruction. His reaction to truth caused quite a lot of despair, the same as Proxy One. And everywhere he went, death followed. It was unintended, but it still arose from his actions. The end of purpose still found despair. One who sought destruction and one who sought peace. Either way, the changes brought by action from truth led to ruin. So is that what we're left with then? That there is no positive outcome to purpose, even if we consider it, even if we change from it? The entire process of having it or not, of running to it or from it, of changing or not, it all leads to ruin? But in becoming Vincent Law, Ergo does find something positive. He left to be among that which he had created. He wanted to experience life with the things he loved, flaws and all. In this, he accepts he had a purpose he struggled with, and rather than forcing himself to immediately confront it, he welcomed the journey to understand it. To discover what in this harsh world could drive something to live on despite the circumstances and the mistakes of the proxies. It's no mistake that a majority of the anime is Vince and Pino later, with Riel simply exploring, wandering across the remains of the original humans and the new humans alike, the domain of Vincent's purpose and his mistakes, just taking in all there is. Vince especially is very content to just take it in, despite the journey supposedly ending in the truth of his being. He's in no rush to see it through, instead taking it as it comes. And once they reach that endpoint, it's nothing for a reason. It was destroyed by Raoul's revenge and Proxy One's manipulation before they could even get there. I don't think there's any mistake about this. What Vincent tells us is that the very act of understanding purpose naturally is what's important, that we must understand truth, not simply react to it, and that is a long process. Those who lived without considering it were shells. The ones who tried to force an understanding were driven to insanity, and the ones who reacted harshly to truth caused nothing but destruction. His distinction is not a new step in our understanding, but rather a look at the whole process, that it is something of its own value regardless of the ends. When Vincent decides not to perish in the pulse of the awakening, since Proxy One had not yet died, he begins his decision with the few words, "Come find me," which is the last thing that Riel had said to him. What draws him back to the cold, harsh world below is the simple comfort of another being, the one who accompanied him on his journey, someone who helped him become a greater being than one reason alone. Vincent is not defined by Ergo Proxy. He is influenced by this reason, changed and molded by it in ways, but also coexisting with it. He isn't simply a shell for purpose, he is a being who also has purpose. His journey of understanding, not understanding itself, is what provided him a better existence. I think Riel is the natural highlight to cap off this message. If the journey itself is what provides value and the endpoint simply exists, then does what purpose is even matter? As a clone of Monad to draw Ergo near, her reason for being was quite simple. She existed to help Rondo continue existing, nothing more. This guides all of her actions, her interest in the case after being attacked, her wish to capture a proxy and return to the city, her accompaniment of Vincent on his adventure, and even her actions in the final fight. As Ergo and Proxy One war, she leaves to stop Daedalus, who succumbed to the desperate nature of despair and was destroying the city from within. Even when she makes it clear from her very first moments that she has no real care for Romdeau, she still risks her life to try and see it saved. Something within her, unknown to her, which she is powerless against, drew her to these actions which ruined her life the same as everyone else. But she makes a simple and important distinction. She calls that irresistible force, the thing that pushed her forward against all odds, something of her own rather than calling it purpose like everyone else.
Even if your future is inevitable and nothing but pain awaits me, I'm still doing what I think is right.
Her actions just happen to overlap with what her purpose might be. It's almost glaringly obvious and upfront. Whatever the action, it can be looked at as simply what you want to do, what you feel is right based on who you are. It's like an extension of the anime's often repeated Descartes quote, "I think, therefore I am." She was created with a reason for being, and it influenced who she was and how she acted. That's undeniable. But in the end, it was the actions she took and then the ones she didn't which made her journey what it was. We can never say whether they were her own or that of some force within called purpose. But what we can do as the masters of our own worlds, those who think and therefore are, is to think what we want of them. Our existence is nothing more than what we think of it. So she decided her actions were her own and that she was at peace with them when confronted with truth after contemplating them naturally, and that was all. In one of her last large conversations of the anime, her and the region's 4 autoraves, those embodying great philosophers, reached this conclusion.
For all creatures, truth must be derived from self.
Each of us has to find our own truth.
It's a rarely blunt moment for an often obtuse anime. This is why I take her arc as the evolution of Vince's. He learned that the journey of understanding is more important than the object of it, and then she described as
the woman who made the future a reality.
Determined from that point that the object of it then doesn't matter. It can be anything, it just has to be found by you. What matters is we tried to understand. A focus on the result, something of which we can never be sure of, can only lead to ruin as it did with Proxy One. And this is all summarized in Vince's final battle against the very one who gave him both being and reason for it, when he says one of the anime's other few blunt quotes.
I'm myself, and that's all I need. There's only one truth that really matters to me.
If his actions line up with his creator's will, it could be fate, or it could just be coincidence. So think, call it coincidence, and live as you are. Think so that you are. And I think that does it for at least the first look at Ergo Proxy. You'll notice I didn't mention a few characters very much, like Pino, and that's because I think there may be some separate topics that those characters explore better. Say with Pino, there's more of this idea of innocence in a harsh world, and really the adventure of becoming human, of finding a soul, and I think there's a lot more to dissect in this anime, and I would be a fool to try and do it all at once, because it's not something so easily understood. Whether that's good or bad, or a sign of something which is positive or negative, I still haven't found out yet, but I think it's a series worth watching, and something I hope I brought an interesting and good take to here today. And as I said, there's a lot more I think there could be discussed in it, so if you want to see those things, obviously let me know with a like on the video or a comment down below, because first of all, it really helps with the algorithm, so then this video does well, and I know that Ergo Proxy will do well on the channel, and thus can talk about it more, but also because seeing what other people think and getting feedback on the content or their ideas entering my mind as well really helps me to create a more rounded content, the things you guys kind of want to see, and again, broaden my perspective to provide something that's really a community effort of growth, not just the ramblings of one person at the corner of the room where a camera sits. Anyway, the series has left me maybe a little bit too existential, and I can feel that infecting my ramblings. So I'll just go ahead and do an outro. There's 4 links in the pinned comment: Twitter, Discord, Twitch, and most importantly, Patreon, where you can get your name at the end of videos like the cool people above me right now. This is the worst outro I've ever done, but I hope that despite that, I will see you again soon.